Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the virtual programming of the Lawrence Family JCC Jacobs Family Campus. My name is Ryan Isaac. I am the Director of Cultural Arts at the San Diego Center for Jewish Culture at the Lawrence Family JCC. Do want to remind everyone who's with us on Zoom, as now I think a lot of us are becoming Zoom experts. We can see many of you. It's nice to see you. Keep in mind that you can be seen. We have everybody muted. If there's a chance later for some Q&A, we can unmute, but also if there are questions or anything that arises during the program, feel free to use the chat function and I will be able to see that. I do also want to thank our underwriters, the underwriters of the 2019-2020 film season and the Arts and Ideas season. It is through the generosity of the underwriters that we are able to present events like this one tonight. So thank you to our underwriters.
I'm a parent of grown children, so I don't have to do this anymore, but I just reflect back at I've been. Had my kids been, say, 4 and 7, 4 and 8 right now, I just imagine that. And I wanted to say, I heard a lot of people worried about how are their children going to do, being denied school and socialization and all the things they usually do. And a long time ago, when I was in graduate school, I read this article that has stayed with me my whole life and that I learned so much from. And it was a study done by Anna Freud with Dorothy Burlingham in London. And they studied the children during the Blitz, during World War II. And some of the children were sent out to the country so they would be safe. And other parents kept their children with them in London. And they looked at the difference between the two sets of kids. And they actually, I found a surprising and enlightening result, which is the kids who did best were not the kids who were sent to the country because they were separated from their parents. And that was really difficult. The kids that did better were the kids who stayed in London with their parents and had parents who reflected to them a face of hope, of trust and hope and safety. And those kids fared the best. And I think we could take from that right now that that's what all the kids of every age need from their parents. And sometimes you even may have to fake it some if you're not feeling it yourself, which is to reflect to the kids it's going to be okay. And we're here, and we're going to make things okay right here, and we're going to keep ourselves safe. And so I just think it's so appropriate right now around being a parent during the pandemic, whether your child is 1 or 18 or older. That's my thought.
Is it safe to assume then that children are more adaptable in these situations than we as adults would be, having our routine change?
It is very safe to assume that children can often roll with the punches and adapt to new situations better than we can, even if they're insisting, I have to have that cereal. It's the cereal I have every morning. And I don't care that you can't buy it right now. Go find it for me because that's all I eat for breakfast. It's a much larger existential adaptability. And I think kids really know how to make lemonade out of lemons. And we can learn from them how to do that.
I've got a couple people who are commenting on the chat that the sound is a little difficult. Diane, do you know if there's
Let me see if I can adjust mine. All right, let's try. I'm going to do some adjustments, okay?
Okay, that's fine. And for the
is this better?
For the couple of you who commented to me that the sound was tough, would you let me know if it's any better for you?
I'll speak so people can tell whether it's better or not.
A little better. So we'll go with that for now and see.
Okay. And I can play with it again, so just let me know.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah, please don't be shy out there if there's some
Yeah,
difficulty.
absolutely. And I'm going to actually move a little bit. We'll see if that helps.
Okay, great. So your work is with children. Is the real work in here, or some of the work, to be done with the parents more so? That we as parents need to either relax or accept what the situation is now and move forward?
Actually, I did write this book called Spoiling Childhood, and I think the sequel right now should be Spoiling Parenthood. That I think I would never tell anybody to relax if you're juggling 10 balls. It's very hard to relax if you're juggling 10 balls at the same time. But I would say that the things to relax about are things that I hear every day right now is, I can't believe I'm letting my child be on screen so much. I don't believe in that. I wouldn't do that. And I would say it is just fine right now to find a place to live a sane life while sheltering in place. So that, I mean, I think the main thing is cutting yourself some slack and also recognizing that everybody's life is upside down. And I don't, sorry, that was my dog. I don't know if for you, you gave up hanging upside down on monkey bars when you grew up. I certainly did. There's no way you would get me to hang upside down on a monkey bar right now. But little kids like to hang upside down on monkey bars. So being upside down is sometimes an adventure. And in some ways, I think we can do that for our kids. I will mention there was a very controversial movie, It's a Beautiful Life, and it was about a father who had his child in a concentration camp and tried to create a fantasy world that was okay for his child. And I took from that movie, again, the message, if we reflect back to our children a safe world that we can create for them, even if the world outside isn't so safe, we're giving them a great gift. But we need the supports to do it. And I think that's why I think parents are the unsung heroes. I think there should be absolute stipends for parents, relief from some of the job obligations that they have. And if they lost their jobs, to have that kind of financial security so they can parent their kids at home. And I will say also, I know that schooling has been iffy and there's a lot of worry about the kids falling behind. And kids have incredible brains and minds, and there's many different ways to learn things. So in the long run, I don't worry about that. They'll catch up on the academics, and they'll have an experience, I think, of creating a life under uncertain conditions. That is an incredible learning experience for all of us.
So you don't worry about some of those aspects with the children. Is there anything that you worry about?
You know, at first, I really worried about the children being cut off from their friends and from school, because kids, from the time they're 2 or 3, start spending a lot of time at school. And I was really concerned about kids crashing and burning because that was being taken away from them. And that is true for some kids, and they do need some help with that. But lo and behold, I was absolutely taken aback by the number of kids who were relieved not to be going to school. And what it said to me was, we need to look at our school system that's stressing kids out as much as it is, and perhaps look at that some. So I learned that in that sense, I do worry about some of the kids. This is really difficult for them. I sometimes worry the most for kids who are only children at home, because kids like to have their own generation around. And when you're an only child, and if you're sheltering in place and not seeing other people, that's a stress. But I don't worry so much that these will be permanent damage. I worry more about the economy on that one. But with the kids, it's just that I think we need to be paying special attention if they have stresses to help them with those.
You had mentioned that, Diane, when you and I spoke a couple of days ago, the children who are now relieved not to be in school. My kids are too young to be at that place right now. I still found it fascinating. And as we've been sheltering for more than 2 months now, I think a lot of norms have been broken down. They had to be. You even mentioned this in terms of your practice, how some of the guidelines had to be loosened for the sake of providing care. How much, or what, or anything specific, or any portion of general child raising and education that is going to be forever changed because we are simply learning better right now and learning differently?
Here's what I would hope would be the deepest learning during this period is the importance of being a community, the importance of thinking not just about yourself, but about other people. So for example, if we put a mask on, we do it to protect ourselves, but also to take care of our community. And I don't think we get enough of that kind of learning, and we don't give it enough to children in our country. And I'm hoping that this is an opportunity to really build that spirit and sensibility, and that will transfer when we're back out in the world for children and youth who have that kind of community spirit and collective responsibility. So in that sense, I think we're learning something really important.
That's interesting. We had a Zoom event on Sunday with a beer and travel journalist based in Brooklyn, and he made a comment in terms of the change of socializing at bars, and how some of these beer festivals had become about the liquid, not about the people. But really, when it comes down to it, it's about community and people. And while beer journalism and child psychology seem pretty much as far apart as you can get, that theme of community seems to be showing up a lot now, and probably because we've had it taken away from us, that it's more apparent now. Do you think that we're going to end up with a generation of children who are more community engaged, or when things open back up, will we revert?
I really hope the former. Right now, it's very difficult because we're all virtual. So it's really hard to kind of set up those kind of community events. But I really do hope that this will be a game change, a paradigm shift, and a new understanding of not taking things for granted. I think of all the things that I take for granted, like going to the store when I need limes for a recipe, and I don't do that now. And my parents were of the Depression generation, so they grew up during the Depression. So I'm really understanding that sensibility of, saving everything, don't waste anything, because you don't know if you'll be able to get it today or tomorrow. And I think we're a country obviously of inequality and great stratification of who has and who doesn't have. But I think we're all learning not to have. And I think that's an important lesson for all of us. It kind of evens the playing field in a way that I hope will develop more compassion. And I know that's not true for everybody in this country right now, but I'm a great optimist that this, instead of a pandemic that will spread, will be a spirit that spreads. So yes, I think we'll see this in the next generation.
And there's likely going to be a transition for children going back to school where they'll be wearing masks, and school won't resume as it was just 3 months ago. So it seems to me that some of the experiences and the lessons learned, even if they're not formal lessons yet, they'll be reinforced just in physical dress.
I think they'll be reinforced in physical dress, and you won't have to remind your children to wash their hands either, when they go to the bathroom or before, because I think it's going to be so ingrained in people in terms of these new habits. And I think the hardest thing is the thing that's most critical and the hardest things for kids are the social distancing. Because kids are really physical, they like to touch, they like to be hugged, they like to be picked up. And I think learning to love across 6 feet, as it stretches the imagination and the feelings and desires of kids, but it also is, again, this learning experience that love isn't about touching, it's about people. And those people are still there. And for me, I don't know if this is true for everybody else here, in terms of community, I've now been able to connect with family all across the country in ways I usually don't. Like our Seder this year was a Zoom Seder, and it went from Canada to North Carolina to California to Chicago. And it was just something we never get to do usually. We never have our family that way. So that leads to, I think what we're experiencing now is certainly stress and worry, but also recognize the importance of our families, the importance of connection. And I do think it also comes with sadness when we can't go visit somebody or see them. I'm in that situation now. My mother is 100, going on 101, and she's in Chicago, where I grew up, and she's in an assisted living facility, and nobody's allowed in right now. They're completely quarantined. So I really have to, so it's sad. I would like to be there, with her, but I have to just like reimagine love from a distance without getting to see her. And I think there's going to be a lot of that learning about what's it all about in terms of love.
I want to encourage everybody on the call, if you have any questions, feel free to use the chat function, and you can send them to me, and then I can pass them along and ask them to Diane. Let me ask you this question based off of what you were just saying. I was initially going to ask you if you had certain tools or strategies for parents to cope through this, but I'm wondering now more, are there certain activities or exercises that have been therapeutic or used during the sheltering that can prove to be a positive outlet for parents?
That's
And I'll add this. We had a history professor on 6 weeks ago or so, and she said that she had made all of her students, college students, keep a daily COVID journal. And it was a way for the students themselves to stay on top of their feelings, and for the professor to also monitor the mental health of her students. And I started keeping a little journal myself, and I just found it just a nice way to dump out some emotion at the end of it every day.
You know, I think it's a great idea for people who like to write in a journal. And if you don't like to write in a journal, I would say don't do it. Because this is the time, the best exercise is finding what are the things that de-stress you the most and carve out some time to do those. The nice thing about a journal is it also helps you to see the evolution over time, like how you felt on March 16th or March 17th in the Bay Area. That's when we had the first day of sheltering in place, and how you feel on May 20th, this many weeks later. So you can see change over time as well, which is, and you can always go back years later. Because one of the things I'm realizing is, not through our choice, everybody here on this Zoom meeting and everybody in the world is living through a phenomenal moment in history. Not one any we would have wished on ourselves, but we are part of an incredible piece of history. And it's a question of what we're going to do with it. So sometimes it's nice to record it as you're going through it. And in terms of the stresses of parenthood during the pandemic, I've said this to parents for years and years when there was no pandemic. So I'm going to underline it now. Occasionally, you will have murderous fantasies. It just comes with the territory of being a parent. And when you do, feel free to harbor them, feel free to have them, create a firewall. Never ever communicate them to your children. You may not want to communicate them to anyone, but do not stop yourself from having them, because in some ways that will be your best outlet. And if you want to turn it into a cartoon, you can turn it into a cartoon or anything else, but that will happen. And on the other side of that, I wanted to mention something else, that this was like a family exercise. It was way more than an exercise. But it was, to me, a really touching and beautiful moment. Somebody sent me this YouTube. It was a family in London. No, they were in England. They were not in London. They were in England. And at the beginning of Shelter in Place, they created their own their operetta of Les Miserables, and they wrote all the words themselves to the music of Les Miserables about the pandemic. And the whole family just performed it together, simply singing it. And you could see that it was both a healing moment, a creative moment, a coming together moment. And these were clearly very talented people. Some of them must be professional singers because they had big microphones in their house. But any kind of a group activity like that, I think they can remind you of the good parts of what parenthood is all about.
That's great. We've got one question from the crowd. For young children who are obviously struggling with social isolation, do you have any suggestions on ways to help them?
Yes, there. Not only are the children are sometimes they're saying, "Where's my friends?" and "I want my friends," and often it's the parents worried about the social isolation and the thwarting of opportunities for socialization, and then the worry comes that they will be delayed or always damaged in their ability to socialize. So I would say, in terms of social isolation, I wouldn't worry about that at all, because socialization comes from any two human beings relating to each other, not just from kids sharing toys in the sandbox. And no young child is ever going to be left alone during sheltering in place. So the child is not socially isolated, because a child's world is much smaller. And if you have your parents, caregivers, your siblings, your grandparents live with you, you're being socialized and you're not socially isolated. And it's important to remember that you're being cut off from your friends. And I know that there's been several preschools in the Bay Area, I assume it's happening in San Diego as well, that are doing Zoom circle times with the kids, so that the kids can have some of that experience of group. But obviously they can't jump across the screen and be with the kids. But I think we should worry more about our social isolation. And if the kids are showing stress and distress about it, I think the best thing to do is, number one, commiserate. Yeah, this sucks. This is really hard when you don't get to see your best friend. And I would suggest that it really helps with really young kids is to create books, to write a story, to make a story, and either illustrate it or cut out pictures, make a collage, to let kids tell their story about what it's like for them to be in their homes with their parents. I actually have a concern on the other side that, a lot of kids the first day of preschool, they cling to the parents. They don't want to say goodbye. And then they're fine as soon as they get involved at daycare or preschool. And then as soon as the parent shows up to pick them up, they burst out crying again on the reunion. There are a lot of kids who are probably soaking up the extended time with their parents they usually don't get. And I worry about the other side of it, that when it's time to go back to school, they'll say, no way, I'm not giving up a good thing. I have to say, I see that in my dog right now, because I work, my husband works, we have to leave the dog for fair amounts of time each day. Now there's somebody home all the time. Our dog's never been happier. I've never been so well behaved, happier, doesn't chew up anything anymore. So I would be prepared for children may have a hard time being unsocially isolated rather than being raring to go. So I would just look for that.
You anticipated my next question just about what's on the flip side when we begin socializing and returning to schools and camps again. But I'm afraid that could happen in my house. So thanks for the heads up. Another question coming in from the crowd. What do you suggest for parents of kids who are resistant to being homeschooled and just want to play all day? I will answer that by saying it depends on your kid. So I wouldn't want to say a blanket answer for all kids because I've seen the gamut of parental responses to that. One is I surrender. Okay, let's just play. I am not going to try and enforce this. My kid cannot learn on screen, so we'll find other ways to have learning experiences, but not with the schooling being imposed. And what has been found in terms of the research that's just starting now is that online schooling works better for middle school and up and less well for kindergarten through fifth grade. So what I would say is, again, cut the kids some slack, but depending on the child, I think imposing a schedule where I guess you barter some. We're going to do some of this. I know this is really difficult. We'll do some. We're going to take lots of breaks. We're going to go back and really pay attention to what is the tolerance level of your child. And you may have 3 kids who are totally different on this. Because I think for some kids, they can do this easily. For other kids, it's excruciatingly difficult. I have found it's been very difficult for kids who have any learning challenges, learning difficulties, learning disabilities. Other kids say, I like it much better than going to school. So you have that gamut. But what I would say is set up schedules for when there will be school, and also give kids a lot of breaks, cut them some slack. This is an old thing I discovered a long time ago. For resistant to school, whether it be homework, online learning, is bubble wrap. And it goes like this. You put bubble wrap on the floor and let kids stomp on it. And just stomp on it for, say, 5 minutes. And then you go back and work a little more. And so I would say know your child and know that it's an extraordinary hardship for many of them to try learning online. And if they are refusing, find other ways to educate in the kitchen, out in the yard, but see if you can just insert alternative ways of learning. But that comes back to the parental stress, which is, for those of you who are educators, it's great, but most parents are not trained educators. So being asked to monitor your child's schooling, particularly for young kids, is a gargantuous task. So I'd say do the best you can. And again, I keep saying, and cut yourself some slack on that. And mostly enjoy your children right now. I think that is the most important learning experience, is for people to enjoy each other. Diane, have you been able to relax or have any fun or do anything different during the last couple months?
Have I been able to relax? Yes. I should say that I'm being very conservative about sheltering in place. And I also have my adult son living with us, who just happened to be here from Queens, New York. Obviously didn't go back because it's not safe to be there right now, which is lovely because we can return to a household of many years ago with at least one of my kids home, and I really enjoyed that. But I have, I've reverted to cooking all the time. I've never cooked so much in my whole life. I love to cook. I usually don't have time to cook, but Saturday morning is baking morning, and every evening is trying new recipes. I I do a lot of walking, take very long walks, and I'm left-handed, so I bring my left-handed Swiss Army knife with me with the scissors. And around where I live, there's a lot of open areas with wildflowers and empty lots. So my challenge is to come back with bouquets every time. And you're never allowed to take from anybody's garden, only from from open areas and public areas. But and I do a lot of gardening and a lot of reading. I feel like I'm doing a lot of reading and a lot of connecting with family. But I will say, I don't want to be Pollyanna. It's just not a relaxing time, for sure. This is definitely not a relaxing time, and I worry about the people who are having a much harder time than I am. I worry about our country, and so I do have a lot of worries. And I also feel really lucky for all I have. Apparently it's a new hashtag that goes blessed and stressed. And I think that is really one that I'm holding on to, is blessed and stressed.
That's wonderful. Diane, I think you've given us a lot to kind of take in tomorrow and beyond. And I thank you very much for that. Thank you for spending time with us tonight. I want to be considerate of your time and also of our attendees tonight, most of whom have small children at home, so time is precious, especially once the sun goes down. So thank you all for being with us, and we hope to see you soon. Diane, books that people can find of yours: Gender Creative Child. Anything else particularly relevant these days, or should we just wait for the pandemic child book to come out in a couple of years?
Right, we'll wait for that one to come out. I've been starting to write blogs for Psychology Today. So that's where I probably will be talking about some of these ideas.
Wonderful. We'll find you there, and we'll share that in this group. Thank you again, Diane. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Have a good evening, and we will see you soon.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.